Good evening, all of you, and thank you for for the welcome. Now, what was it all about? The claps, first class or motivation for me? Okay, yes, I would be thriving on that energy. So, fine. So today we are starting with international relations. Is the voice not audible to the online students? Am I no sound? Am I audible now? Fine. Fine. I hope they'll be able to hear me in some time. Fine. So we are starting with international relations. What would be the importance of international relations in this entire UPSC journey? In terms of prelims, in terms of mains, and in terms of interview. Can you tell me how important is IR, and in which part of your exam would IR be more relevant, according to you? Mains. The general idea is that IR is important as far as mains is concerned. Yes, and year on year, UPSC has been asking a minimum of 4 questions from IR. Previously, when they had changed the pattern, there were certain years where they've asked 6 to 7 questions, but yes, we do not expect the repeat of it anytime soon. The trend that we will be going by is that since 2015, they've asked 4 questions each year on IR, and presently the trend is 2 10 markers and 2 15 markers. Yes? 2 10 markers and 2 15 markers. So cumulatively it comes up to 50 marks questions in mains asked in your GS2 paper. Yes, and as far as prelims is concerned, we have often overlooked the importance of IR. And why so? Because UPSC itself was erratic as far as asking IR based questions. Generally on year to year basis, we would say 2 to 5 questions from IR. That is what we would expect on those lines. Of course, even until 2021, there were certain years where they've asked 8 to 10 questions on IR, but they were far and few in between. But now we find that from 2022 and 2023, there has been a trend where they have asked 10 questions from international relations. Yes, so we find and we believe that as far as UPSC is concerned, it keeps evolving itself. So you find that since 2022, they have changed the pattern of essay paper as well, where they have gone for all-out philosophical questions. Yes, of course, there might be aberrations in the coming few years, but that is the general pattern we believe UPSC would stick on to. So here, once again, what I'm trying to emphasize is that IR would be more relevant for prelims as well. Yes, from now on. Onwards, you cannot take IR for granted as far as prelims is concerned, and we need to pay attention to the IR section as well. Now, when it comes to prelims, the question arises is what to study in IR for prelims. Yes, that is the question that arises, because generally what we will discuss in the class would be analytical discussion on bilateral ties, on regional ties. Of course, that cannot be asked by UPSC. Analysis directly cannot be asked as far as IR is concerned. Deduction of it somewhere it can be asked, but not directly. So majority of what we study, we do not expect them to ask in your prelims. So when you're preparing for prelims, those 3 months when you're focusing your attention on prelims, what is that from IR that you're expected to prepare? Yes, keeping in mind the kind of questions that UPSC has been asking over the years, we can deduce a certain trend from which UPSC would ask question in prelims. Yes, I would want you all to jot it down. Yes, the trends or the kind of questions we can expect as far as prelims is concerned. The traditionally most important area has been that of international organization. International organization, its member countries, important summits and declarations. See, it is quite unlikely of UPSC to ask substantive question from important summits or declarations, but certain important regional organization. For example, on BRICS, they have asked questions on its important declaration. In fact, the first summit, the declaration on the first summit. Yes, so we cannot leave this area out. Member countries, important summits and important declarations, the headquarters. Yes, so international organization primarily from that arena. Yes, of course you would know the mandate, and as far as IR is concerned, we will see that the mandate of almost all regional grouping, all international grouping is somehow interrelated. Yes, somehow one and the same. Yes, except for maybe a UN and a WTO, which has a very clearly demarcated objective. A World Bank, ADB, NDB, AIIB, yes, all the banks would have a more or less similar objectives. Yes, so that is the nature of these organizations. Next, another important area from where UPSC asks question is about disputed territories. Disputed territories is one of the favorite areas of UPSC to ask questions, and disputed territories and dispute between which two countries? Disputed, volatile regions or countries at war, their neighboring countries. Yes, even vis-a-vis important water bodies, for example, vis-a-vis the Caspian Sea, vis-a-vis the Black Sea, yes, vis-a-vis the Baltic Sea. You should know the neighboring, the littoral countries surrounding it. Yes, these are important areas from which UPSC, they've asked a question last year on Afghanistan and this year on Ukraine. Yes, so you find, and previously they had asked question on Caspian Sea, Black Sea. Yes, so you find a tendency of asking neighboring states. Yes, now some might say that it pertains more to world geography, but I don't subscribe to that idea. Maybe world geography can help, but the context of the question is more often than not from IR. Yes, if you have studied your IR well, if you have looked at regions and the conflicts in the region, the contestations in the region, the areas of cooperation, how things are evolving, you will be in a better position to answer these questions. Yes, when they had asked a question on Caspian Sea, there was an agreement between the littoral countries of the Caspian Sea, and that is the reason they had asked a question on it. Yes, so that is how you do it. Yes, Ukraine war is Ukraine ke littoral country. Yeah, neighboring states have been asked in context of Russia-Ukraine war, Afghanistan because of Taliban in Afghanistan, because of the Afghanistan being a failing state. That is the reason they've asked a question. Yes, so it is in context of IR that you find questions. And then cities, regions, and to which country they belong. Yes. So for instance, they've asked question this year on Zaporizhia and Kherson. Yes, so it was in context of Russia-Ukraine war. These provinces of Ukraine were in use. Kachin state is a state in Myanmar which has been, which is deep in civil war. Yes, it is known for year-on-year civil wars going on there. Yes, so you find questions being asked from those areas. Yes, we have had question from the Swat Valley. We have had numerous questions, regions in news, and a question has been asked by UPSC over the years. Yes, so you find that yes, these are some of the areas from which we expect question. Another area which explicitly in your these booklets which classify the previous year questions across different heads, you would more often than not find these questions directly listed under world geography. Let me give you an example. For example, UPSC had one year asked a question saying that which of the following prominent geographical feature is found in a region known as Maghreb. Now, till the time you did not know that Northwest Africa is referred to as the Maghreb region, you could not have answered the question right. Yes, so it was as simple as the Atlas Mountains, but you needed to know the Maghreb region. Yes, they've asked questions, for example, they've named the capital cities of the Southeast Asian countries and they've asked you to organize them in north-south direction. How do you do it? Maybe in world geography, if you were if you just looked at the map very carefully, otherwise also, as part of IR, we look at the map carefully, yes? We look at how countries are placed, how the borders are there between the country. One another very prominent example, as far as there is also this region in IR referred to as the Levant region, basically comprising countries such as Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Cyprus. So UPSC had asked a question that out of the 4 countries that listed down, which do not share a border with or do not have a coast with Mediterranean Sea. And this region is the eastern shore of Mediterranean Sea. So generally the expectation is all these countries have borders with Mediterranean. Now had you not looked at the map carefully enough, you would not be in a position to answer that question. Fine, so several such questions you are able to answer more, I feel, from the perspective of IR. Yes, then from, say, simply world geography, or maybe let us say from IR and world geography together. If you have done a good job with your maps, if you have not just looked at the map blankly, rather in context of regions, in context of regional organizations, you are able to answer these questions relatively in a better way. Yes, with greater confidence. Fine, so these are some of the areas from which we expect question as far as prelims is concerned. So you know now, yes, please go ahead when you're preparing for prelims. Apart from all that we are doing, of course, at the end of the day, it is an integrated preparation, and more so when we have revival of questions such as first statement and second statement. If both the statements are correct, is second statement the correct explanation of the first statement? In context of such questions, of course, analysis, there is a more scope for analysis coming into the scene. Otherwise, also several such questions, be it on membership of countries to regional organizations, can be understood and answered correctly in the exam if you know the context in which this regional organization has been created. Yes, so analysis is of course important, and that is what I'm trying to tell you, that ultimately it is an integrated preparation. Yes. So throughout your UPSC preparation, you are expected to prepare for both mains and prelims together. It is later on that we segregate. Only when prelims are approaching, we want to have a more focused approach towards prelims. Otherwise, when you are preparing for mains, you are simultaneously preparing for prelims as well. Yes, fine. And of course, IR would be relevant to your interview stage, very much so. It is one of the favorite areas for the interviewers to ask questions from. Yes. Also, one area where IR at times becomes relevant is your essay paper. Previously, we had UPSC used to ask, quite some years back, 15 years back, there would be a trend of asking at least one IR question in essay. Of course, over the years, they have changed the pattern. Here and there, few years, you find one IR-based question. The recent most, I think so, was relevance of NAM in a multipolar world. They had asked a essay question directly. Otherwise, also when you have philosophical questions and you are expected to write tangential answers. Yes, the question might be philosophical, but you are civil services aspirant. You are not expected to write philosophical answers to it. You need to write concrete, objective answers. Yes, and points which can be counted on, crisp points which can be counted on the fingertips. It should not be beating around the bush. You require wider horizon. You need wider points so that it does not become beating around the bush. You have concrete points to fill in the blanks. And there also, you can draw in perspectives from international relations at times. Fine. With that, we'll start with our with the IR discussion. But once again, one more topic which you should pay attention to with IR or with any other subject of your UPSC is first note down the syllabus. What does UPSC say as far as the syllabus of that subject? Because that is biblical declaration. Yes, it is the biblical testament for us. It is it which tells us what to read in newspaper, what not to read, what to expect in exam, what not to expect in exam. Yes, so your syllabus and previous year questions would be the best guide to understand what can be expected in the exam. Yes, and what is the syllabus of UPSC as far as IR? For prelims, they do not make any mention of IR. Yes, and as far as mains is concerned, first and foremost, they talk about India and the neighboring states. Second is politics and policies of developed and developing countries and its impact on India. Third is bilateral, regional or multilateral groupings, treaties, agreements of which India is part of or not part of, and its impact on India. Fourth is international organizations, structure and mandate. And the fifth is diaspora. Yes, so it is India and the neighboring states or the neighboring countries. Of course, we understand the neighborhood is going to be an important area of discussion and important area from where questions can be expected. The other point in the syllabus, please read it carefully. Politics and policies of developed and developing states and its impact on India. First and foremost, please understand everything that we discuss in international relations has to be discussed from the perspective of India and its impact on India. So whatever is going around in the world, we need to understand it from how it affects India's national interest. How does it align with India's foreign policy goals? Yes. So that is important. And here in the second point, they are talking about politics and policies. The general understanding for us as students of UPSC is that politics of even India is not that very relevant as far as questions that are being asked in UPSC. Yes, questions on domestic politics would not be asked per se. But here the syllabus reads the politics and policies. So politics of the neighboring states, politics of the important countries in the world cannot be discounted as far as questions in the exams are concerned. Yes, and UPSC previously has asked questions on the politics of the neighboring states and of the global powers. For example, one year they had asked a question as far as there were war crime tribunals established by Bangladesh in Bangladesh, yes, and it resulted in polarization of the Bangladeshi society. Shahbag protests resulted. So it was an internal development, political development as such, vis-a-vis the politics of Bangladesh. However, question in UPSC was asked, and how does it affect India-Bangladesh relations? A question on the presidential election in Maldives was asked, and how does it affect India-Bangladesh relations? Yes, so once again, now when I say that UPSC does in the syllabus mention politics of the neighboring states or the world, countries in the world, I am not asking you to start studying every politics that is going on around in the world. Yes, but what is the point is, if certain pivotal development is going around, even if it relates to politics of a particular country, we need to be aware about it and we need to understand it from the perspective of India. How would it affect India and India's foreign policy goals? Yes, how does it affect India and that country's relation? So basically we are not discounting politics of foreign countries, provided it is a pivotal development and repeatedly being covered in the newspaper. That is how you and I get to know it is a pivotal development. If it is repeatedly covered in the newspaper, we will keep a track of it. Fine. Also it talks about, say in the third point, let us discuss this regional, bilateral, regional, multilateral grouping, treaties, agreements, which India is part of. Of course, they would be important. Also, those which India is not part of are important. Yes, for example, UPSC previously had asked a question on the Iranian nuclear deal, of which India was not part of. Yes, it was signed. It was Iranian nuclear deal was concluded between P5 plus Germany, plus EU plus Iran. Yes, India was nowhere in the scene, but a question was asked on it because it had an important ramification as far as India-Iran relations are concerned. Similarly, an important regional grouping is RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, of which India presently is not part of. But that does not mean UPSC cannot ask a question from RCEP. Previously, in fact, we used to expect it being an important area from where UPSC can ask question. These days, it is not in news much, so we do not pay as much attention in the class. Yes, so any development, any grouping, any agreement of relevance can be asked, and we have to study it from the perspective of India. International organization, the syllabus reads structure and mandate. Yes, and we discuss it. We discuss structure, mandate, membership, everything surrounding it, how India is participating, why India is not participating, whatsoever it is. And the last point is diaspora. Diaspora is also one of the favorite areas of UPSC. They like to ask questions on diaspora. And previously they have gone very specific into a diaspora question. Yes, they've asked questions such as the role of Indian diaspora in Southeast Asia. Yes, so we all are aware about the role of Indian diaspora, say in US, say in West Asia, but very specific to diaspora in Southeast Asia. So what I'm trying to tell you is that pay special attention to any such coverage in the newspaper. In the newspaper, if there is a discussion on diaspora and it deals with Indian diaspora in a particular country, Indian diaspora in a particular region, we need to pay special attention to, because it would not be within the scope of my class to cover diaspora for every region. Yes, so you have to take the aid of current affairs magazines, you have to take the aid of your newspapers while covering this topic, because they tend to ask specific questions in this area. Fine. So this is as far as the syllabus is concerned. Now, what will be your sources to prepare for IR? What are the sources that you would refer to as far as IR preparation is concerned? First, you will have your class notes. I will try and dictate as much as possible, but given the paucity of time, we will also make utilization of printed notes. We will use printed notes as well. Second would be your, or let me put, let second be current affairs magazines. And third would be newspapers. Yes. No books as far as IR is concerned. There is no such book covering IR from UPSC perspective as such, and IR is also a very current affairs oriented subject. Generally, when you have books from scholars, it is one point of view that they are representing. Yes, we need diverse, we need neutral perspective, and it is current affairs oriented. There is of course a background, and there is a strong case of continuity in foreign policy of India and India's relations with its neighboring states and other countries. But still then, whatever background you require would be sufficiently covered in the class. Beyond that, you do not require background. Because please remember, it is just 15 marker, maximum 15 marker question, 250 words you are expected to write. How much would you discuss the background? Yes, so there is a limit to how much you need to write in the exam. That can be sufficiently covered through these three sources. Yes, though I have mentioned current affairs magazine as the second and third as newspapers, but I would surely recommend, please read your newspapers. Yes, current affairs magazines comes into the picture where you don't have to make notes per se. You don't have to make notes of every article that you think is relevant in your newspaper. They are doing that job for you, but that does not mean you stop reading newspapers. Current affairs magazines is like a synopsis, is like notes. You cannot directly go into the notes without knowing the background as things were developing. Otherwise, it becomes very monotonous and it becomes very difficult to recall and write in the exam, to remember your current affair magazine's notes itself. Yes, so the basic requirement today of UPSC, and UPSC is on that trend, it is always trying to make such materials irrelevant. Yes, it wants to see who is actually putting the effort, himself, herself. Yes, so that requires you to read newspapers. Only then you will have clarity of thought, you will have conceptual clarity. Otherwise, conceptual clarity is going to evade you always. It will remain a mirage. Yes, so to gain conceptual clarity over the current affairs development, please devote time to newspapers. Making notes, not making notes is your prerogative. Of course, nobody is expected to make notes of the entire paper, that is not expected at all. When you are reading newspaper, of course, you'll pay attention to your editorial section, your explained section. As far as the world section is concerned, more often than not, there are news articles talking about visits. So today what has happened, they're talking about. Or just the past day what happened. But when we prepare for the exam, we prepare on issues. Yes, so issues are covered in your editorials and explained section, but once in a while you might also find a good article coming on in the world section. So flap through it. If you find any article which is relevant, please read through it. Yes, so please, it is a humble request that you regularly read your newspapers. Newspapers are becoming all the more important for your prelims. Yes, and prelims is ultimately the first step. If you do not clear prelims, you will not be able to express the knowledge and your skills that you might have gained in this preparation. Yes, so of course you please be regular in newspaper reading and gain that conceptual clarity so that you are able to pass through these exams. And of course then you have your current affairs magazines. Fine. Anything else that you want to ask me? As far as the lectures are concerned, this is going to be the lecture plan that I am sharing with you. Today's class would be an introductory class. We'll start from the perspective as if that everybody, each one of you is new to IR, that you are not familiar with IR. So some basic jargons, some basic terminology, some basic concepts that you should be aware of international relations that we would be using in our discussion as we go forward. We'll discuss today. Yes, we'll have a brief discussion on India's foreign policy and its determinants. This is an important area from which UPSC likes to ask questions. Yes. Third, we'll start with India and its neighborhood. We'll discuss all India's neighboring countries at a bilateral level. How is our relations with each one of them? Yes, so Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka and Maldives. We'll discuss the regional organization of South Asia, SAARC. We'll discuss it in context of BIMSTEC. Then we'll go into India and Indo-Pacific. So Indo-Pacific, since it is ASEAN centric, so we'll discuss ASEAN or Southeast Asia. We'll discuss India, Japan, India, US. We'll discuss China as well, India-China relations here. India, Eurasia. So India, Central Asia. India, Russia. India, Europe. Yes. Next we'll discuss India, West Asia. We'll also refer to India-Africa relations, India-Latin America relations. India-UN, India and the nuclear question. Yes, so under India and the nuclear question, we'll discuss India's nuclear doctrine, the international nuclear treaties. Yes, the 4 international nuclear treaties and the 4 MECRs, multilateral export control regimes, such as NSG, Australia Group, Wassenaar Agreement and the MTCR, Missile Technology Control Regime. Yes, and we'll try and cover the syllabus in 22 to 24 lectures. I really cannot understand what was this sound all about. But yes, the width of the subject is such that we need this much time. Otherwise it becomes difficult because you are also going to be writing in the class. Yes, if it had been a discussion without notes, of course, we could have done in far fewer classes. Fine. Abhishek says, Vision IAS study material. How should we, would it be an important source? Yes. So as far as Vision IAS study material is concerned, please use it as a reference material. Yes, that would not be your primary source. Once we discuss in the class, you can go back and flap through its pages if you feel that we have missed out some point which is covered there, some head which is covered there, you can read through. But otherwise, it would not be one of the primary sources of your references. Yes. India and Latin America and Caribbean, LAC, India-LAC relations, Latin America and Caribbean. Fine. Can we start with today's class then? Yes, please settle down. Terms and concepts. We are starting with certain basic terms and concepts. On this topic, I'm not going to dictate anything. You are expected to make running notes. Otherwise, also, I'll provide you a printed material. Go through it. Yes, in the printed material, you will have random terms referred to, which you can refer. Here, I'm trying to make it more structured so that it is easier to understand and recall. Fine. So, the first concept that we'll discuss is the various schools of thought of IR. The first school of thought would be realism, second would be idealism, and third would be liberalism. Of course, it is not an exhaustive list, only from IR perspective, from the GS perspective, what is relevant. Now, what do you understand by realism? Realism as a school of thought of IR. It is the dominant school. It is the dominant school. We have discussed international relations until very recently only from the realist perspective. Yes, until the Second World War only from the realist perspective. Cold War was once again you could describe the existing world order more from a realist perspective. So you find that it is only from say since the disintegration of USSR that we find emergence of this liberal idea and liberal ideas of the world order taking over. But still then realism has not lost its ground. Realism is and has been the most dominant school of IR. Russia-Ukraine war is understood only from the perspective of realism. Yes, so it continues to be the dominant school of IR. And this school of IR says that nation states or countries are basically motivated by national interest. Yes, the nation states or the countries are motivated in international relations from the perspective of pursuit of their national interest. Yes, every country is interested in pursuit of its national interest. Yes, it also says that the international order or the international scenario represents anarchy or is that of anarchy. Yes, the international order is that of anarchy. What do we mean? Unlike in a nation state where there is a proper hierarchy of structures, yes, there is a sovereign government. If you do not follow the rules and regulations of the sovereign, you would be punished. Yes, there is no such structure as far as international relations is concerned, and therefore international order or international scenario is said to be that of anarchy. And as a consequence, this national interest can be satisfied only if countries procure more and more power. And therefore, national interest is nothing but a contest to gain more and more power. It is an endeavor to gain more and more power. So the realist school defines international relations or international politics in terms of power. International politics is all about power because nation states are interested in pursuit of their national interest, and they will be able to realize their national interest only when they have power. Because in a chaotic international order, what prevails is Matsya Raj. Yes, what prevails is Matsya Raj, that is the bigger fish eating the smaller fish. So the more powerful you are, the more likelihood of you securing your national interest. That is how international politics is defined by realism. According to realism, international politics is nothing but a power contest. Because in international politics there is anarchy. In such a scenario, a nation state will be able to secure its national interest only when it augments more and more power. Yes, and therefore, in such a scenario of Matsya Raj, international politics is equal to power. Fine. The exact opposite of realism is idealism. Yes, idealism is an utopian description of international politics. It discusses how international politics should be. Unlike realism, which talks about how international politics is. Yes, so it talks about how international politics should be, and therefore it says that international politics or international relations should be based in cooperation. There should be cooperation between countries, between nation states. Yes, and how would you go about cooperating? Cooperation based on morality or moral laws, cooperation based on international conventions, laws, treaties, etc. So it is an idealistic or utopian description of international politics. Now, is there any utility of utopia? What is the utility of idealism? If it is not describing how things are, if it is talking about things which do not exist, what is the utility of idealism? Or what is the utility of utopia in general? Yes, to compare as to how far we are from the idealistic world. Basically, it serves as a goalpost. Yes, it tells you where you want to head towards. Yes, that is the utility of idealism or utopia in general. Every time, it is not that idealism or utopia or daydreaming is of no use, because it tells you where do you want to reach. Yes, where do you want to be headed towards. Fine. The next school of thought is liberalism. Yes. Liberalism accepted certain basic ideas of the basic premise of realism to begin with. Liberalism said that yes, nation states are motivated by national interest. This is correct. Yes. It also accepted the fact that international politics represents a scenario of anarchy. Yes. So it accepted the basic premise of realism, but then it tried to suggest ways to come out of this basic premise. It said that, but what is the difference here? In the school of liberalism, it believed man to be a rational man. Yes, man is a rational man who can think, cost-benefit analysis he'll do. And what is a nation state? Nation state is nothing but individual, writ large. Collection of individuals is what represents a nation state. Yes, so if man is rational, that means those who make nation state, it is also rational. Nation states are also rational, and therefore, though international politics is a scenario of anarchy, but a rational man, a rational nation state will try and come out of this anarchy, because anarchy is harming the nation state itself. Yes, so the way to come out of anarchy is maybe replicate what exists at the level of nation state, at the level of a country. And in the country we have a central government. So basically we want to replicate a central government at the international level, and therefore they gave the idea of UN. And previously they had tried, it was based on a similar concept, the League of Nations. League of Nations failed, and once again UN was created. Yes, so this idea to come out of anarchy by replicating what exists at the national level in the form of a central government, central sovereign, yes, is UN. Therefore, it was these scholars who got together, the world leaders got together to create UN to replicate a national government of sort at the international level. The other idea of liberalism, for instance, it says that let's promote economic interdependence. Why promote economic interdependence? Promote economic interdependence because it will make wars costlier. Yes, wars will become costlier because not only does it involve the cost to fight, but it also involves the cost of foregoing your economic development, your foregoing your bilateral trade, and therefore it would discourage trade, discourage war. Yes, in fact, India believed in developing economic interdependence to overcome war as far as, say, China is concerned. Yes, our former PM Manmohan Singh was a strong advocate of economic interdependence to avoid war. In fact, he suggested it even in context of Pakistan at one point of time. Yes, so there is this idea of developing economic interdependence. The third sub-school of liberalism also talks about developing people-to-people ties, because there is a consensus that most wars are born out of misunderstandings, are a consequence of misunderstandings. Yes, so if misunderstandings can be avoided, maybe wars can be avoided. So how do you avoid misunderstanding? By encouraging more people to people ties, more civil society to civil society ties. Yes, that is a way to encourage more understanding and avoid misunderstanding, which can lead to war. In fact, we will discuss the present state of India-China relations. It is one of the worst phases in the bilateral ties. Yes, since 1962 war, our relations have hit a very low because of the border incursions by China along the LAC, along eastern Ladakh, as well as the eastern portion of LAC. And we say that what has led us to this state of relation, where in fact it led to border incursions, was in fact misunderstanding, growing misunderstanding, one misunderstanding building onto the other as far as India-China relations is concerned. With Xi Jinping in China and PM Modi in India, two strong leaders have put forth tried to put forth very strong images of these two countries without understanding the ramification it is having for the other. Yes, and we'll discuss, there is Vijay Gokhale, a prominent scholar, he talks about how it is misunderstandings between these two countries which has led us to the current state of events. Fine. So that is the idea. Misunderstanding can cause wars, and the way to stop misunderstanding or prevent misunderstanding is maybe to encourage people-to-people ties as suggested by liberalism. So this is one of the prominent schools. But yes, realism continues to be the dominant school. It is said all other schools of international relations are footnote to realism. Yes, are mere reactions to realism. Fine. So that is the idea. Fine, I hope you understand the three schools of IR that we have discussed. The next topic that we'll discuss would be ways to ensure peace, or suggestions to world peace. The realist suggestion to world peace is what is known as balance of power. Is balance of power. What is this idea of balance of power? Balance of power is realist prescription for peace. And presently we say that balance of power more often than not prevails at regional levels. Yes, and it requires 3 to 5 important countries, yes, at comparable levels of power, balancing one another. Yes, and no country is allowed to gain preponderance of power. No country is allowed to gain preponderance of power. Yes, if any country tries to gain preponderance of power, other countries, the remaining regional powers will come together to punish such a country and thereby re-establish the balance. Yes, so it is peace is maintained because all the countries are at equivalent levels of power. Nobody is able to do whatever they want. Yes, nobody is allowed to do whatever they want to achieve their national interest. Yes, if anybody tries to augment, tries to gain preponderance of power, the others will come together to punish it. Yes, this is the idea as far as balance of power is concerned. And during continental Europe has generally demonstrated balance of power historically, and presently we see balance of power in play in West Asia. Yes, in West Asia there is play of balance of power. Yes, you have important poles in West Asia, for example Saudi Arabia, you have Israel, yes, and you have Iran. So they are trying, they do not allow the other country to gain preponderance of power. They are trying to maintain that balance amongst themselves. Yes, that is a way to ensure peace. Then there is the liberal prescription. We have studied establishment of international organization, development of economic interdependence or people to people ties. Yes, yes, all the liberal countries will subscribe to this idea of peace, generally speaking. There are other sub-schools, there are other prescriptions of peace under liberalism. We are not talking about all. We are talking what is relevant from GS perspective. Yes, for example, one of their suggestions is establishment of democracy. More democracies, more peace is the belief of liberalism. Yes, the other prescription or the other way to maintain peace historically has been through diplomacy, through negotiations. Yes, through diplomacy between countries. And when it comes to diplomacy, there are various tracks of diplomacy. Yes, but from UPSC perspective, we'll just refer to track 1, track 2, track 3. Yep, we can also write it this way. Yes, track 1 diplomacy, track 2 diplomacy, track 3 diplomacy. What do we understand by track 1 diplomacy? Track 1 diplomacy is at the level of state to state, government to government. So whenever the government is negotiating with another country's government, it is an example of track 1 diplomacy. Can you give me examples of track 1 diplomacy? All the summit levels, see, India, Pakistan will have multiple tracks. It will have track 2, track 3, all tracks will be operational. But within those tracks, which is track 1? Government to government. Government to government का example होगा summit level meetings. 2+2 meetings, yes, all the ministerial meetings, the bureaucratic level meetings, NSA level meetings, all these are examples of track 1 diplomacy, government to government. So ministers or bureaucrats, serving bureaucrats, when they meet with their counterparts is an example of track 1 diplomacy. Track 2 diplomacy at non-official level. It takes place at non-official level. So between two countries at non-official level. Now what is this non-official level? Retired bureaucrats, academic experts or subject experts, civil society organizations. Yes, all these are examples of non-official level. Fine. So one of the famous track 2 diplomacy is the Nimrana dialogue between India and Pakistan. It is an example of track 2 diplomacy involving retired bureaucrats, retired military officials, academic experts, civil society organizations. Yes, so it represents non-official level. And track 3, What is track 3? People to people level. Common people like you and me interacting with counterparts of foreign countries. So maybe student exchange program, yes, cultural exchange program, when we travel from one country to the other is an example of track 3 diplomacy. Yes, student exchange, cultural exchange programs can be given as examples. There is also something which is known as track 1.5 diplomacy. Track 1.5 diplomacy. What is track 1.5? It is an amalgamation of track 1 and 2. So it will involve government plus non-government officials. Yes, so it will involve ministers as well as retired bureaucrats, retired military generals, civil society actors, academic experts. Yes, so it is an amalgamation of track 1 and track 2. And one example can be Raisina dialogue. Yes, in case of India, we keep referring to Raisina dialogues. Yes, Raisina dialogue in India is organized by Ministry of External Affairs plus ORF, Observers Research Foundation, which is a think tank. Yes, we are calling it track 1.5 not because who is organizing but who is participating. So who participates in a Raisina dialogue? Everyone. You have ministers, you have serving bureaucrats, retired bureaucrats, yes, civil society actors, academic experts. So everybody, all government and non-government officials all participate in Raisina dialogue, and therefore it is referred to as track 1.5. Yes, it is based on the participants. We categorize these dialogues. Fine. There is also something known as multiple track diplomacy. Multiple track diplomacy. And something known as public diplomacy. What is multiple track diplomacy? Yes, all different tracks of diplomacy taking place simultaneously. Different tracks taking place simultaneously. So as far as say India and US is concerned, we have track 1, track 1.5, track 2, track 3 all happening simultaneously. Yes. So as far as India Pakistan is concerned, maybe track 1 is not happening as for us to see. Yes, so maybe it is not happening evidently, overtly, but it might just be happening in the background. Public diplomacy क्या है? Public diplomacy refers to a kind of diplomacy whereby government of one country interacts or engages in dialogue with people or citizens of another country. It is a unique form of diplomacy. Generally, the government of one country speaks to its own citizens, to its own people. It is not expected to interact with citizens of a foreign country. But in case of public diplomacy, we find that government of one country is interacting with people of another country. And why is it so? It is a relatively a new phenomenon, of course. Why is it so? To form a favorable opinion of one's own country with the foreign public. To form favorable public opinion in foreign country. To form a favorable opinion of one's country with the foreign public, or favorable public opinion in a foreign country. Now why are we so interested in having a favorable public opinion? Let them not have a favorable public opinion. How does it matter? They are not decision makers. Yes, it is a democracy because of spread of democracy. Because of spread of democracy, what exists is popular sovereignty. And it is no more a day of legal sovereignty but of popular sovereignty. People wield power. Yes, it is us who decide which country gets projects, infrastructure project development chances in India. Yes, so that is the idea, because of spread of democracy. Fine, so this is public diplomacy. There is another form of diplomacy referred to as back channel diplomacy. What is back channel diplomacy? It is a form of diplomacy which happens away from media glare. It can be either of the tracks, yes, and most probably it will be track 1 or track 2. Track 3 anyway is not covered. Media is not very interested in it. Does not result in any reporting which has much ramification. It can be track 1 or track 2 diplomacy. When they happen away from the media glare, it is referred to as back channel diplomacy. Now, why away from media glare? What is the purpose? Other countries का क्या? To remove public pressure. क्योंकि जब भी media glare में होता है, तो there is an expectation, the government, yes, there is an expectation that the government should deliver, the government should not compromise on a country's national interest. For example, India and Pakistan, we have a tough set of relation. No government can be seen as compromising as far as the other country is concerned. However, to conduct negotiations and to reach at certain outcomes, acceptable outcomes, there has to be some amount of compromise that has to be made, some amount of adjustment according to the other country's national interest. So that generally takes place away from media glare, that is back channel. Yes, so it is when there is no public pressure to deliver results quickly, yes, or to deliver results in a set framework, we prefer to conduct such diplomacy away from media glare, away from media attention, and that is known as back channel diplomacy. For instance, there were reports that NSA level meeting is taking place between India and Pakistan in back channel format. Yes, and that in fact resulted into a ceasefire agreement that was concluded in 2021. Fine. When our relations were in fact at a very low. We used to say our relations is in a state of deep freeze. Fine. So this is about the various forms of diplomacy that we see. Next is this idea of power. Idea of power. And before we discuss power, there's a question by Akarsh. Akarsh says, nowadays China is trying to gain preponderance of power. Yes, China is trying to gain preponderance of power, yes, because China is what we call a revisionist state. It is not satisfied with the existing global distribution of power. It wants to emerge as the global leader. So of course it is trying to gain preponderance of power, and therefore we are trying to balance China as much as possible. Bilaterally, multilaterally, in a regional format, whatsoever is feasible, the global powers are trying to balance China. And an example क्या है? Quad is the biggest example of trying to balance China. AUKUS, yes, Australia, UK and US grouping. Yes, all these groupings are meant to balancing China. Fine. Coming back to the topic, power is in fact the central concept of politics. What is politics? Politics is contestation over power. Yes, politics is nothing but contestation over power. Yes, and according to IR, the dominant school was the realist school, which defined international politics in terms of power. So power is very, very central. Central concept of politics and central concept of international relations. Now there are different types of power. Yes, there is something known as hard power. Yes, there is something known as soft power and something known as smart power. Now what is hard power? पावर ठीक है, एनिमी पे यूज हो रहा है हार्ड पावर, लेकिन क्या है? मिलिट्री पावर और या बस? बेसिकली हार्ड पावर is the power of power of coercion. You're forcing the other to act in a way which suits you. Yes? What is power? How do you define power? A is said to have a power over B when A is able to force B to act in a manner which is suitable to A. Yes, even against the wishes of B. That is the idea. So hard power is a power of coercion. It is the power of forcing another to act in a certain way which is favorable to the other. Yes, and hard power, we generally associate hard power with military power. But please remember, hard power also has, yes, or also comprises economic power. Yes, so hard power comprises military power plus economic power. The policy of sanctions is the biggest example of economic power as hard power. Yes. What is soft power? It is the power of attraction. Not culture is a source of soft power, but not limited to culture alone. Yes, so it is power of attraction, and it is a relatively new concept given by a political scholar by the name of Joseph Nye. Yes, in 1990 he gave this concept of soft power. It is in context of ICT revolution that the emphasis on soft power or a conspicuous identification of soft power. Soft power is what? Power of attraction. And examples: cuisine, Chinese cuisine, the Mexican cuisine, the Indian, chicken butter masala, yes, is garnering interest world over. Yes, so it becomes a source of attraction. Yes, McDonald's का अलग है. McDonald's का example आप कहोगे, कहा जाता है मैकडोनलाइजेशन ऑफ द वर्ल्ड, मतलब ग्लोबलाइजेशन, होमोजेनाइजेशन, उसका वो होमोजेनाइजेशन हो रहा है रादर देन अट्रैक्शन टुवर्ड्स वन सॉर्ट ऑफ अ कल्चर. ठीक है, क्विजीन हो गया. फिर यू हैव फिलोसफी, है ना. फिलोसफीज, Indian various philosophical school, Vedanta and all these are very famous. Yes, philosophy is mythology. We say Ramayana is not just an Indian epic but an Asian epic. Yes, recently there was an article by Devdutt Patnaik. He had discussed how Sita in Indian mythology of Ramayana has 2 sons, but in Southeast Asian version of Ramayana she has 3 sons. Yes, so everybody has their own interpretation and definitions. Yes, so mythology, alternative medicine, so you have Unani, Ayurveda, homeopathy, yes, acupuncture for China, yes. These are all examples of the various dance forms also, we can say. For Indian cultural, Indian classical dances, folk dances, Bhangra. You have for the West, salsa, yes, yoga, all this, Hollywood, Bollywood, the film industries, Tollywood. Yes, you have film industries, music, art and culture. All of them are in fact sources of attraction, are sources of soft power. Yes, religion for that matter is also a source of soft power. Yes. Fine, so this is what do we understand by soft power. Achha, what is the relevance of soft power? Before we get into the relevance, let us briefly describe what is smart power. What is smart power? Yes? Though smart is associated with technology, but that is not how Joseph Nye himself, a decade later in early 2000, he gave this concept of smart power. Smart power basically refers to a judicious mix of hard power plus soft power. The right mix, the judicious mix of soft power and hard power. Yes. So at time we can just discuss, rather than saying will India become a global power, we can talk about will India become a smart power in the world. Yes. So Joseph Nye, within a decade, he realized inadequacy of soft power in its own, and therefore he gave the idea of smart power as a judicious mix of the hard power and soft power. Now what is the relevance of soft power? What is the relevance of soft power? Yes, relevance of soft power बताओ. टेररिज्म में सॉफ्ट पावर क्या है? टूरिज्म. टूरिज्म इज अ tourism is a means, है ना? It is maybe a means to realize the soft power of another country and spread the soft power of our own country by talking about our culture, our philosophies, our viewpoint with people from another country. Now the relevance of soft power in international relations. Yes, we are discussing it from international politics point of view. See, soft power is very relevant. In fact, it was when USSR disintegrated. No political scholar had ever predicted disintegration of USSR. Yes, it was a sudden event. Nobody could predict it. Nobody could foresee it. And when it was happening, nobody could understand it. Why was it happening? Yes, and one of the reasons now that we agree to why did USSR disintegrate was because of the lack of soft power, it is said. Yes, it had hard power, it had a lot of military power, it might not be doing as well as economically as the West, but it did have a lot of hard power in itself in terms of military power, and the lack of economic power in terms of comparison with the West could also not justify its disintegration. Why it disintegrated? Because it lost its attraction which was holding it together. The communist idea which was holding it together lost attraction. Now the relevance of soft power can also be understood by the fact that in the recent memories, who have been the global powers? Who have been the superpower? UK. As the colonial power, it was once the superpower, once the most important power. And then US. After World War II, US emerged as the superpower. Now when UK was the superpower, it had, for any country to become superpower, we today realize that it needs hard power plus soft power. Either one on its own is insufficient. Yes, so UK, though it was a colonizing power, so it had hard power. Militarily it was a navy, strongest navy, the biggest navy. Yes, economically it was doing very well, it had several colonies. Yes, economic jewels like India was its colony. Now what was its soft power? Soft power के context में उन्होंने एक ideology दिया, white man's burden. This justified, why is it making colonies? In fact, it gave a moral justification for its actions. Yes, it is its responsibility of every civilized nation to civilize the uncivilized. That is what it said, and that is the reason. Okay, yes, there has to be some moral justification that attracts you. With US, hard power we know, economic power, military power. Yes, soft power क्या है? A land of opportunity. It is a land where merit is recognized. Yes, it does not matter where you start from, but if you have merit, if you have capability, you will outshine others. It represents an example of meritorious society. It does not matter which caste, which class, which race you belong to, which country you are from, but if you have merit, you will outshine others. Yes. Now China today wants to become a superpower. Yes, it has a substantive hard power. Yes. Where it lags is the soft power. The world is not ready to live under the hegemony of China. Does anyone like to have a leader? Nobody likes a leader. Yes, nobody wants an authority figure on top. Now why would anyone accept another to be an authority figure? When you are attracted towards it, you feel that yes, this person is justified to tell me how should I behave. Yes, so vis-a-vis China, it lacks soft power. Yes, the world is not ready to accept the leadership of China as of now. So वो सब hard power है, economic power है, manufacturing power है. Yes, you might be an economic power, but there has to be acceptance of you as a leader. Yes, many people who are more skilled in doing what they do than their leaders themselves. अगर आप individual level पे देखोगे, organizational level पे देखोगे, तो ऐसा होगा कि कई बार who is a subordinate? There is an MNC. The CEO of the MNC maybe is less skilled than one of his managers at doing a particular job, but then he has that leadership skill. Yes, so you want to follow him and not the manager per se. Yes, so that is the idea. India on the other hand is a classic case of, India had a lot of soft power. Yes, India had so much of soft power that it is said that if power was calculated only in terms of soft power, India would have been a thumping superpower. But we find that soft power alone is insufficient. In fact, it is on our basis of soft power of this idea of non-alignment, that would create a NAM, third pole in a bipolarized world. Can you imagine a newly independent country with zero credentials of power, with mounting debts, with illiterate population, with no resources to undertake a development, with which had been a subservient country for 200 years, suddenly comes on the world stage and creates a third pole? There are two superpowers sitting, and you create a third way out. You say, I do not accept either of your ways and I'll create my own way. How was India able to do that when it had literally zero credentials of hard power? It was out of its soft power. Yes, and our leadership at that point of time could harness that soft power. They had that novel idea of non-alignment. We say that India has never been able to come out of this idea of non-alignment. अभी भी अगर आपसे मैं पूछूं generally, what is India's foreign policy? Half of you would tell me it is India's foreign policy. अगर general term में बोले तो it is the policy of non-alignment. That is how we can think of India's foreign policy. Indian elites till date have not agreed on a single name after the policy of non-alignment. We cannot agree on a name because no idea, no concept, no term captures the grandeur of non-alignment. We have come out with multiple versions, multiple alignments, strategic autonomy, issue-based politics, issue-based foreign policy, sabka saath, sabka vikas, but nothing captures the grandeur. With every government, the name changes. The government officials themselves do not always use this term for describing India's foreign policy. And sabka saath, sabka vikas, sabka vishwas is as relevant to India's internal politics. Yes, maybe more so. So we do not have, a grand name for India's foreign policy, and policy of non-alignment actually should have become irrelevant in 1990 with the disintegration of USSR. Policy of non-alignment loses relevance. The idea, because the basic idea क्या था, strategic autonomy उस पे based था, तो वो carry forwards, but the name should have changed. But the Indian elite have not been able to come out with any successive name because nothing captures its grandeur. So do you understand? So India, it is said, had power been calculated only in terms of soft power, India would have been a thumping superpower, a country with no credentials of hard power. While there are two superpowers, it is not just it is on its own creating a third way. There are two superpowers who are criticizing it, blackmailing it, pressurizing it, criticizing its idea, calling it India's opportunism, calling it what not. But still then steadfast, and we create a third pole which has more followers than the capitalist camp or the communist camp. Yes, so that was the power of soft power. Fine. So anyways, that is the relevance of soft power. Fine. These are few concepts. You want to take a break? Fine, let's take a break and then I'll cover one more idea, and after that we'll start with our IR discussion. Fine, let's take a 10 minutes break and then we'll continue. Fine, starting once again. There is a question, is population a hard power or soft power? See, population is neither a hard power. Yes. Population is neither a hard power or soft power, yes. Population, when it is involved in cultural activities and garners a name for itself at international level, yes. Individuals, they can be an example of soft power to the country, and minds of who are involved in maybe developing military capabilities. Yes, so maybe their hard power, but academic excellence, population as such is not a source of either. Yes, population is what makes a nation rather than it being source of hard or soft power in general terms. Buddhism as a tool of soft power. Yes, religion, I have mentioned religion. Buddhism is in fact a source of soft power for India. This statement, I said state is what did I say? Yes, state is individual writ large. Basically, state is a collection of individual. Yes, that is what it means. Ma'am, please explain, please give the example of public diplomacy track and multiple track diplomacy simultaneously, multiple tracks operating. So, at the same time I gave the example of India-US relation, an example of public diplomacy. Example of public diplomacy can be when the Indian government, we have, in fact in 2006, India had established a division of public diplomacy under Ministry of External Affairs, and it would take concerted activities so as to influence public opinion in other countries. Yes. Howdy Modi, did it involve interaction with Indian diasporic community? So, but they are foreign citizens. Yes, to an extent, yes, an example of public diplomacy. But we cannot say it to be the correct example, a full-fledged example of public diplomacy. Government trying to interact, trying to influence the public opinion in foreign country. Fine. Fine. Starting with the discussion that we were having, the next idea that I am discussing is the idea of world order. Is this idea of world order? What do we understand by world order? Global distribution of power. An overview of global distribution of power. Yes, if you were to stand on top and look down, how is the power distributed amongst countries? Yes, that is the idea of world order. Yes, it is the overview of global distribution of power amongst countries. For example, the world order has been unipolar, bipolar, or multipolar. Yes, what is the example of bipolar world? Cold War era, when the world was divided in two camps, one led by US, the other led by USSR. Unipolar, we say after disintegration of USSR, the world witnessed a brief moment of unipolarity. The world witnessed a brief moment of unipolarity, brief moment. And brief moment कब से कब तक था? 1990 till 2001. 1990 till 2001. 2001 में क्या हुआ था? 9/11, the bombing of the Twin Towers in US, and that marks the beginning of decline of US hegemony. Yes, so a decade of unipolarity of US, unquestioned leadership of US. And multipolar world. अच्छा, unipolar world में basically the idea is there is one superpower. In bipolar world there are two superpowers. Yes, and in a multipolar world there are three or more powers. Yes, and multipolarity is generally witnessed at regional level. Yes, we were of the idea that at the global level also we are going to soon see the rise of multipolarity. But we find that today we do not know exactly what kind of a world order is going to emerge. There seems that maybe a bipolar world might also emerge. Yes, a bipolar world where the global powers would be divided into two camps. One side led by China, Russia, Iran, Turkey. Yes, on one side, and the other side represented by US and Europe. Fine, US, EU, all these countries. Fine. So multipolar world order would be three or more parts. Regional level का example West Asia हो सकता है ना, जहाँ पे you have these three poles. Europe is also an example where you have France, Germany, Italy, and France and Germany more so at comparable levels of power. Yes. Now what is this idea of a superpower? What do we understand by superpower? हार्ड एंड सॉफ्ट पावर तो है, लेकिन उसके अलावा सुपर पावर को कैसे डिस्टिंग्विश करोगे अदर पावर? टुडे इंडिया इज ऑल्सो अ स्मार्ट पावर, है ना, बट नॉट नेसेसरीली अ सुपर पावर. हेजेमनी मतलब क्या होता है? लीडरशिप. दे आर द लीडर. कैन यू ऑल प्लीज सेटल डाउन? यस, Who does not want to settle down? Please, if you do not want to settle down, it's okay. You have the luxury to go out, but please let's not disturb everyone else. Yes? Fine. What do we mean by superpower? Superpower is one who has immense power, who has such concentration of power that when all countries of the world come together, they cannot balance the power of a superpower. Yes, superpower will have such immense power, such immense cumulative hard and soft power that it can be balanced only by another superpower, as had happened in the bipolar world. And when there is a single superpower, in that circumstance, even if all countries of the world, they aggregate their power on a weighing scale on one side and they try and balance the power of one country, that is the superpower, the superpowers will overweigh the power of the cumulative power of the world. Do you understand? Therefore, when there exists a single superpower, there is no option to balance the superpower. The only available option is to bandwagon, is to do what the superpower says, is to participate in the global order created by the superpower. There is no other option but to bandwagon behind a superpower. Yes? So that is the idea of superpower. So much power that is concentrated in a single country that it cannot be balanced by cumulative power of rest of the countries of the world. A superpower can be balanced only by another superpower and not by other countries as such. Fine. And the unipolarity that we have witnessed has been only for a decade following the disintegration of USSR. Fine. Fine. The last idea that I will discuss is that of a difference between a nation versus a nation state versus a civilizational state. What is a nation? Huh? Yes, nation is summation of people who feel one. Basically, nation represents an ethno-linguistic grouping. Yes? What is the basis that they feel one? Because ethnically they are similar, linguistically they speak similar language, and this creates a sense of belonging to one another. Yes, there is a strong sense of belonging. Yes, there is a sense of being one. Now, what do we understand by a nation state? What is a nation state? Nation state comprises, yes, नेशनल इंटरेस्ट कुछ और है, नेशनल इंटरेस्ट क्या है, गोल है, लेकिन नेशन स्टेट खुद क्या है, what how do we define a nation state? Yes, there is, you have territory and this territory is inhabited by a population who feel that they are one. Yes, there is an ethno-linguistic group which inhabits this territory. What else? There is a government which enjoys sovereignty. Yes, these are the four attributes, four essential attributes of a nation state. Yes, is India a nation state? Is India a nation? A controversial question. Is India a nation? See, India, at one point we used to say India is a nation in making. Yes, India in fact represents several nations. There is a Gujarati nation, there is a Marathi nation, there is a Tamil nation, there is a Telugu nation, there is an Assamese nation, there are Odia nation, there are several nations. Yes, that is how we define nation. Nation क्या है? Ethno-linguistic group with ethno-linguistic similarity. So Gujaratis, they are an ethno-linguistic group, so is a Marathi, so is Tamilians, so are the Telugus. Yes, so in fact, if we go strictly by this definition of nation state, is India a nation state? We, of course, we have a territory, a government and the government which enjoys sovereignty. But our R is not a population which is of one ethno-linguistic group. We represent several ethno-linguistic groups. Racially also we are very, very different. South Indians are different from North Indians and they are different from Northeasterns. Yes. So in fact, India is said to be, it's a technical term, it is said to be, India is a state nation. India is a state nation. It comprises several nations and each state is in fact a nation. India is a state nation. Now, please don't go ahead in the exam and write this, that India is a state nation. Why am I telling you? Because UPSC asks such question. If they ask you explicitly, please you know the answer, you know what it means and go about writing your answer accordingly. But on your own, do not take the initiative of talking about state nation and nation state, that India is not a nation state but a state nation. We do not want to exhibit our knowledge. Yes, if and when asked, please yes, write your answer accordingly. Yes, so India is in fact a state nation and not a nation state, technically speaking. Yes, now what is a civilizational state? Yes, civilizations तो है, लेकिन civilizational state मतलब क्या है? A ethno-linguistic group which is not merely representative of a historic territory but that of a civilization, which represents a civilization. Yes, so yes, one of you was writing G20 is based on the theme of Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, and Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam represents Indian civilizational value, that world is a family. Yes, and India is one example of a civilizational state. China is an example of civilizational state. Yes, so write it down. An ethno-linguistic group, yeah, a nation, write down a nation state that merely does not represent a historic territory but represents a unique civilization. India, for example, is a civilizational state. There is also this term mercantilist state. What is a mercantilist state? A state which follows mercantilist foreign policy. Yes. And what is a mercantilist foreign policy or a mercantilist state? The state actively intervenes. It actively intervenes or interferes in the trade so as to ensure favorable BOT. A state which intervenes in international trade so as to ensure a favorable BOT. All the colonial states were mercantilist states. Yes, and presently any country which is an example of a mercantilist state? China. China is one such country which is an example of a mercantilist state. Fine. What are the actors in international politics? The primary actor in international politics is a nation state or a country. Yes, and all other actors in international politics are non-state actors. In international politics, the primary actor is a nation state, or the traditional actor has been a nation state, has been a country. Yes, but with globalization we find the role of non-state actors increasing in international politics. Examples of non-state actors can be anyone and anybody who is an actor in international politics but not a nation state. So terrorist or terrorist organizations, civil society organizations such as NGO, MNCs if they are intervening in international politics. Yes. Terrorist organizations, civil society organizations such as NGO, MNCs, if they intervene in international politics, if they are impacting international politics. Yes, so all these are examples of non-state actors. Yes, questions might refer to non-state actor, role of non-state actor in such and such relation. So there you need to understand what is a non-state actor. Fine, so this is a brief introduction of the terms and concepts. I'll pass on the PDF, go through it. If you have any confusion with respect to any term or concept, you can ask me tomorrow in the class. Fine. They have previously, during Cold War era for that matter, US used to use MNCs as an instrument of the state policy. Yes, so there have been several such examples. For example, Cambridge Analytica impacting national politics of US election, but role of Russia. Yes, so that is how. MNCs in the past also several times, है ना, US MNCs Cold War era में तो बहुत ज़्यादा use करता था US. Right? So fine, we are starting with the first topic as far as IR discussions would be concerned. Foreign policy and its determinants. Foreign policy and its determinants. How would you define foreign policy? What do you understand by foreign policy? Yes, how would you define foreign policy? It is a policy, so it is a course of action, chosen course of action or planned course of action to pursue a country's national interest. Foreign policy is nothing but a statement of a country's national interest and the means to achieve that national interest, the means to realize that national interest. Yes, so what is foreign policy? Please write it down. It is the chosen course of action. It is the chosen course of action to secure a country's national interest. Full stop. Write down. Foreign policy is determined by a number of factors, and they are referred to as determinants of a country's foreign policy. Which are the common determinants? You can name a few. Determinants of a country's foreign policy would be geography, economy, what else? Yes, politics of a particular country, political party formation. Is it a coalition government? Is it a majoritarian government? Is it a dictatorship or the authoritarian government? Is it a democracy? Yes. What else? History, culture, demography, society में लिख लेते हैं, है ना? Demography. Is it a secular country? Yes, what kind of a country, what kind of a society? Is it a plural society? Is it a multicultural society? What else? World order. Yes, there are different factors. Yes, we can go about leadership and all this society, we have written it down, or social milieu, we can say, the societal composition. All this are factors as far as shaping a country's foreign policy is concerned. See, we'll discuss a few here which is going to be important from India's perspective and UPSC's perspective. Culture and geography are two important determinants of India's foreign policy. Yes, as far as say political party formation, politics of a country, social milieu, demography is concerned, you will find examples of it as we discuss the bilateral relations. Yes, so I am not going to here discuss it because for us to grasp it in totality would be difficult. When we are discussing a bilateral relation, you'll be better able to appreciate the role of domestic politics for that matter in determining our foreign policy vis-a-vis a country. Yes. But as far as determinants is concerned, we do expect there might be a 5 marker or a 10 marker. A full-fledged question can be asked on geography as a determinant of a country's foreign policy, culture, and if I'm not mistaken, UPSC has already asked such questions previously in the exam as well. They've asked a question on role of domestic politics in determining a country's foreign policy. Yes, so they've asked a number of questions and you can expect questions from here. Let us start with geography. How does geography determine a country's foreign policy? When we talk of geography, what are we exactly referring to? To the geographical factors for that matter. Yes, geographical factor can be location of a country. Yes, natural resources that are found in that country. Yes, it can be size of that country. Yes, so the various geographical factors, population size, the geographical size of the country. Yes, there are these factors that we are referring to. Fine. When it comes to geography as a determinant, geography for long has been identified as a determinant of international politics or of foreign policy of a country. For example, Napoleon the Great also talked about how geography is an important determinant of a country's foreign policy. We have an entire school of geopolitics which is basically discussing the role, studying and discussing the role of geography in politics and more so in international politics. Fine. We have scholars like Alfred T. Mahan who have commented that those who control the Indian Ocean will control or rule the world. Yes, so you have several geopolitical scholars that discuss the role of geography in politics. Yes, as far as India is concerned, we say India's location at the center of the arc which connects Aden is in Yemen and Tokyo. Yes, so India's location at the center of the arc which connects Aden with Tokyo has made India a very important country in global politics. So much so that during the Cold War, both USA and USSR at one point wanted India to join its camp. Yes, so that is one of the reasons why they wanted India to join their camp is because of India's strategic location at the center of the arc, of this Asian arc, which makes India a gateway into East Asia, into Southeast Asia, into West Asia, and therefore these countries, these two superpowers wanted India in their camp. Why did India adopt the policy of NAM or the policy of non-alignment? Yes, why did we adopt this policy of non-alignment? One of the reasons why, there were several reasons. See, though non-alignment is referred to as India's idealism, but there is no policy, no decision in foreign affairs that is taken in idealism. There is always realistic ground, rational ground for why or why not we adopt a policy. So there are various reasons why we adopted the policy of non-alignment, and one of the prominent reason why we adopted the policy of non-alignment is the fact that India as a newly independent country which was subservient for 200 years believed liberty to be the most precious value. Yes, considered liberty to be the most precious value. Equality was important but not more than liberty, because we were subservient to a foreign power for so long. So once India became independent, we found ourselves ideologically closer to the capitalist world. However, we were in geographical proximity to the communist world. China was a communist country, and we'll discuss Central Asia was also once part of the Soviet Union. So it is because of this dilemma that ideologically we are closer to the liberal world but geographically closer to the communist world. We chose the policy of non-alignment. Even in the present times, Russia-Ukraine war, India has adopted a softer stand on Russia. Yes, we have not condemned Russia, we have not sanctioned Russia. Yes, why has India done so? Because from our perspective, Russia-Ukraine war is a problem of Europe, not Indian problem. Our problem is China, a belligerent China, a muscular China which is trying to assert itself along India's borders, along the disputed borders. So in context of China, we find Russia to be important. West is important as far as maritime balancing of China is concerned, in the form of Quad, in the form of AUKUS. But Russia is important in terms of continental balancing of China, because Russia, like India, shares disputed borders with China. Yes, so therefore we cannot actually adopt a position as adopted by West on Russia. Fine. We have several foreign policies such as Look East policy, Look West policy, which target a geographical region, yes, and have been expressed geographically. India put forth its candidature of UNSC, permanent member of UNSC, and one of the grounds on which we put forth our candidature is in fact on the ground of our population. We represent 1/6 of the humanity. Every 6th person on the face of the planet is an Indian. Yes, such is the large population that we ought to be a member of UNSC. Yes, so you find several such examples where geography, we will discuss with respect to our foreign policy at a bilateral level, how our foreign policy vis-a-vis say Sri Lanka gets complicated because of geography. Sri Lanka is geostrategically located. Bangladesh is geostrategically located. Yes, so that is how it is. So in general terms, geography is an important determinant of a country's foreign policy. Fine, and it has been so as far as India is concerned. Let's write it down. Write down. For long, geography has been identified as an important determinant of a country's foreign policy. Full stop. In fact, Napoleon considered it as the prime determinant. Of a country's foreign policy. Full stop. Next point, write down. School of Geopolitics emphasizes the role of geography in politics. Full stop. Write down. Geopolitical scholars like Alfred T. Mahan emphasized that those who control the Indian Ocean will rule the world. Next point, write down. India's geographic location at the center of the Asian arc, also you can write down, at the center of the Asian arc, extending from Aden to Tokyo, makes it a gateway to Southeast Asia, East Asia, and West Asia. Full stop. Because of it, the two global powers during the Cold War era competed competed to include India within their sphere of influence. Competed to include India within their sphere of influence. Next point. Apart from the other reasons why India adopted the policy of non-alignment, comma, one of them was its geographical proximity to the communist world, while ideologically it found itself closer to the liberal world. Next point, write down. India's location at the head of the Indian Ocean, comma, apart from the other factors, comma, makes India a net security provider in the region. Next point, write down. Even presently, India's foreign policy on Russia-Ukraine war is dictated by geography. Full stop. Write down. China represents, same point, China represents the primary security threat to India. Full stop. While West is important for maritime balancing, maritime balancing, in bracket you can write down Quad, QUAD, all in caps, comma, Russia is critical while West is important for maritime balancing, in bracket Quad, comma, Russia is critical to continental balancing of China. Full stop. Write down. India shares disputed land borders with China. And so does Russia. Full stop. Write down. Therefore, India did not join the West in condemning or sanctioning Russia. Sanctioning Moscow. Condemning or sanctioning Moscow. Next point, write down. Apart from the above examples, India's foreign policies such as look west and look east policy. Abhi look east has been renamed as act east. Look west and act east policy. Look west and act east policy are expressed geographically and target geographical regions. Last point, write down. In fact, India's population size as the most populous country of the world, makes it an important contender for UNSC permanent membership. Full stop. Fine. So this is about geography as a determinant of India's foreign policy. Fine. Next we'll discuss culture as a determinant of India's foreign policy. How is culture a determinant? Culture becomes a very important determinant of India's foreign policy. Why? Because India is a civilizational state. India is a civilizational state and therefore culture becomes a very important determinant. Why? Because being a civilizational state, your worldview, how you look at the world, how do you perceive the world, is shaped by one's culture. Because this culture and these cultural values are so deeply ingrained in our thinking that our worldview, how we look at the world and how we perceive the world, is in fact dependent upon our culture. So much is the impact of the culture that India's first Prime Minister, who was also the chief architect of India's foreign policy, Jawaharlal Nehru, when he was formulating the foreign policy for India, he said that he is not coming out with any new or a novel foreign policy for India. Rather, he is merely rediscovering it from India's past. Yes, we find that India is one unique country whereby in its constitution under Article 51 we make a commitment to international peace, to abiding by international law and committing to international peace. And this article can be understood as a consequence of Indian civilizational values. Yes, Indian civilizational values such as Vasudev Kutumbakam, such as non-violence, such as Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah, all these dictate us or ground our belief in world being a single family. Yes, and therefore we propose all such ideas of non-violence, and therefore we are committed to world peace. We can say that unlike other countries who try and put forth their national interest, try and achieve their national interest through the use of hard power, yes, India is a unique country which uses soft power to achieve, to put forth its national interest. We emphasize on the Buddhist connect. We are trying to build the Buddhist circuit and the Ramayana circuit to in fact gain influence in India's neighborhood. Yes, so we are a unique country which rather than emphasis on hard power, we emphasize more on soft power to achieve our foreign policy objectives. We can talk about how culture, Indian culture is a source of India's soft power. Yes, India's culture in the form of the philosophy, the mythology, yoga, the alternative medicine, art and architecture are all source of India's soft power. We can further say that when we are talking about India's tradition and India's culture, till starting from Article 51, we have been talking about so-called passive tradition. Passive tradition is represented by Buddhism. It is a tradition which emphasizes on peace, avoiding war, cooperation, all these objectives, all these ideals. But that does not mean that Indian culture does not have a realist tradition. We have in fact a very active realist tradition represented in Kautilya and his Mandal Siddhant, Arthashastra Mandal Siddhant. Yes, and this Mandal Siddhant is what? It is the earliest theory of geopolitics. Yes, what does Mandal Siddhant tells you? It tells you that your immediate neighbor is your natural enemy. Yes, India, China, India, Pakistan are natural enemies because there would be border disputes. There would be dispute based on land. And your neighbor's neighbor is your natural friend. Afghanistan is a natural friend because you have shared enemy. Yes, so that is the idea. So Kautilya's Mandal Siddhant is in fact the earliest, one of the earliest theories of geopolitics. Yes, so we do have an active realist tradition, and this realist tradition is apparent in BJP's foreign policies. One of the major political parties in India, in fact, the major political party in India's foreign policies. Fine. And also a very unique feature of civilizational states is that these civilizational states are not satisfied by utilizing foreign policy to meet their national interest alone. Yes, they are not, their objective is not mere achievement of national interest. Achievement of national interest is a big goal, but civilizational states believe that mere achievement of national interest cannot be the goal. They in fact want to shape the world order according to their worldview. Because this worldview is so deeply ingrained, we believe this is the right way to look at the world. So we want to shape the world order according to our worldview. And India in fact was once successful to shape the world order according to worldview when we created the third pole in a deeply polarized world of Cold War era. Yes, so a newly independent country creating the third pole based on its worldview of non-violence. Fine, so that is the idea. So that is the role of culture as far as foreign policy is concerned. Write it down. Yes, see, we are claiming ourselves to be mother of democracy. But it is a self-claimed, है ना? तो इसीलिए अब इसको नहीं लिख के ये कह सकते हैं. But you can say the democratic tradition finds root in Indian culture. देखो अभी यहाँ पे controversial है. Democracy finds roots in Indian culture, but is democracy a part of international politics? वो हमारा foreign policy का हिस्सा नहीं है. India is different from US. How? Both are democracies. We are the world's largest and they are the world's oldest. But US as a liberal state believes that democracy results in more peaceful world order. अब वो चाहे ये बिलीव करे ना करे, उनका जब नेशनल इंटरेस्ट डिमांड करता है, दे बिलीव इन प्रोपगेटिंग डेमोक्रेसी इवन एट गन पॉइंट, which has not been successful, which has resulted into chaos and more disorder. Yes, on the other hand, India has no such foreign policy. We do not talk about democracy in our foreign policy. हम डेमोक्रेसी का तभी एम्फेसाइज करते हैं मानो हमें एक डेमोक्रेटिक कंट्री के साथ एंगेज करना है, तभी तक. उसके बियॉन्ड हम नहीं करते, बिकॉज वी बिलीव it is for the people of the country to decide the form of government. Now if the people have decided on whatever form of government, we are willing to engage with it. So be it the junta regime in Myanmar, है ना, be it a communist party in China, yes, whatever the form of government the people decide on, we are ready to engage with that government. ठीक है, तो इसीलिए हम इसको यहाँ नहीं यूज करेंगे, लेकिन रोल ऑफ कल्चर इन इंडियन ट्रेडिशन, इन इंडियन पॉलिटिकल वैल्यू सिस्टम, तो वहाँ पे यू कैन टॉक अबाउट. और ये कहाँ से आता है? रूट्स. अभी हमने कहा कि इंडियन सिविलाइजेशन हैज रूट्स ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी. तो रूट्स ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी, कैन यू गिव मी एन एग्जांपल? जनपद वगैरह, ठीक है, हमारा आर्ग्यूमेंटेटिव ट्रेडिशन से बोल सकते हो, ठीक है, ये तो बहुत डायरेक्ट एग्जांपल हो गया, बट अदरवाइज इंडिया रिप्रेजेंटेड अ वेरी स्ट्रॉन्ग आर्ग्यूमेंटेटिव ट्रेडिशन. दैट इज द जिस्ट ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी. डेमोक्रेसी इज ऑल अबाउट डेलिबरेशन, डिस्कशन, आर्ग्यूमेंट्स, है ना, नॉट अग्रीइंग टू ईच अदर्स व्यूज एंड देन स्लोली मूविंग टुवर्ड्स अ कंसेंसस, है ना. थीसिस, एंटीथीसिस और सिंथेसिस है डेमोक्रेसी. Yes, so it is in this context these value systems have been deeply ingrained in Indian society. Why India is a continuous civilization? Because of this argumentative tradition. We did not believe ourselves to represent the monolithic truth. हम हमेशा एक्सेप्टिंग रहे हैं. हम फ्री मार्केट प्लेस की तरह ऑपरेट किया है, फ्री मार्केट प्लेस ऑफ आइडियाज. यस, where everybody could come share their idea. If we were willing to accept those ideas, we would accept. Not willing, we would reject. So that is how we have functioned, and that is how we have survived as a continuous civilization. तो डाइडेक्टिक ट्रेडिशन मतलब क्या होता है? नहीं, उसका मतलब आर्ग्यूमेंटेटिव ट्रेडिशन है. हमारा सोसाइटी ओवर द पीरियड ऑफ टाइम स्टार्टेड एम्फसाइजिंग ऑन ओबीडियंस, है ना. रेस्पेक्ट फॉर एल्डर्स को सिंबलाइज कैसे किया? क्वाइट ओबीडियंस, है ना. तो वो इवेंचुअली डेवलप हुआ. लेकिन अगर एंशियंट हिस्ट्री देखें तो वहां पे वी हैव अ वेरी एक्टिव आर्ग्यूमेंटेटिव ट्रेडिशन. Yes, so medieval times has been a times of decay for Indian society. That is the reason British people from such a small island could govern such a big country like India. Yes, so that is true. But यहाँ पे और didactic मतलब होता है argumentative, है ना. तो that is the idea. Middle ages, yes, is then a time of decay. जब where you stopped questioning things and you blindly started following whatever was happening. Buddhism, the सबसे biggest example of argumentative tradition देखो, Buddhism, Jainism are rebel childs of Hinduism and they have flourished in India. So flourished so much that we have propagated it everywhere in the world as well. Yes, so that is the idea. Fine, write it down. Culture. Write down. Culture shapes the worldview. Culture shapes the worldview. And hence foreign policy of India. Write down full stop. India being a civilizational state perceives the world in terms of its cultural values. Next point, write down. So much so that the first Prime Minister of India, who was also the prime architect of India's foreign policy, commented that he is not formulating any novel, NOVEL, he is not formulating any novel or new foreign policy, rather merely rediscovering it from its past. Rediscovering it, quote, double inverted commas and underline. Next point, write down. Merely rediscovering it from India's past. Full stop. Rediscovering it would be in inverted commas, double inverted commas and underline. Next point, write down. India's commitment to international peace is evident in Article 51 of the Indian Constitution. Full stop. India is a unique country. To have such commitments embodied in the Constitution itself. To have such commitments embodied in the Constitution itself. To have such commitments embodied in the Constitution itself. Full stop. Write down. It is born out of Indian civilizational values. Born, B-O-R-N-E. Born out of Indian civilizational values such as Vasudev Kutumbakam. Please look at the spelling and write it accordingly. Vasudeva Kutumbakam. In bracket, world is a family. World is a family. Sarve bhavantu sukhina. Sarve bhavantu sukhina. Let there be prosperity in the world. Let there be, in bracket, let there be prosperity in the world. Comma, emphasis on non-violence. Non-violence. On pluralistic tradition. Pluralistic tradition. What do you mean by pluralistic tradition? What is the difference between diversity and plurality? Diversity is mere existence of diversity. Yes, different viewpoints, different cultures, different values. Plurality incorporates respect. It is not mere tolerance of diversity, but respect for diversity. Yes, so India is a unique country with tradition of plurality. We were not simply a diverse country with a tradition of tolerance, but a plural country. Yes, so that is the idea. Full stop. Next point, write down. Unlike other countries, which emphasize on hard power, in achieving their national interest, comma, India has used soft power to increase its influence, with foreign countries. For example, India hosting the Buddhist Council, comma, building या constructing the Ramayana and the Buddhist circuits, etc. Yes, even with respect to Bamiyan Buddhas in Afghanistan, we had provided some aid for its restoration. Yes, with Sri Lanka, when our relations deteriorated, government of India resorted to emphasizing on its Buddhist connect. Yes, with Sinhalese majority, we try and emphasize the Buddhist connect. Otherwise, the Tamil connect. Yes, so we find that culture has been used as a tool of our foreign policy. Next point, write down. Culture, in fact, is a source of India's soft power. For instance, Indian mythology, comma, Indian philosophy, comma, alternative schools of medicine, comma, yoga, comma, Bollywood, etc. Are a source of India's soft power. That is what you have written, in fact. Yes. Full stop. Write down. Next point. Despite the dominance of the passive tradition, despite the dominance of passive tradition in India's foreign policy formulation, despite the dominance of the passive tradition in India's foreign policy formulation, can you make it formulation traditionally, comma, there exists a strong realist tradition represented by Kautilya, and his Mandal Siddhant. Full stop. The Mandal Siddhant states that one's immediate neighbor is one's natural enemy, while neighbor's neighbor is one's natural ally. Change the para, same point. The present dominant political party in India lays greater emphasis on the realist tradition. Last point, write down. Civilizational states like India are not merely satisfied with the pursuit of foreign policy to only secure their national interest. Full stop. They would want to shape the world order. According to their worldview. Which in turn is shaped by their culture. Full stop. For instance, India carved out CARVED, carved out a third pole based on values of sovereign equality, comma, domestic non-interference, etc. in a bipolar world. Full stop. Write down. India co-founded NAM. India co-founded non-aligned movement. Yes. that is it then. There is a question, ma'am, could you define national interest with regard to IR? With regard to IR, is there a specific definition of national interest? Whatever is national interest is national interest. Yes, just a minute. Yes. So basically your economic goals are also your national interest. If you want to become a third largest economy, it is a national interest. Yes, you developing nuclear weapon status is a national interest. We having good relations with the then existing superpower is a national interest. We seeking strategic autonomy in foreign affairs is a national interest. So national interest will be all inclusive, all encompassive. Yes, not narrowed to our relations with other countries or international politics per se. Fine. I hope it is. I've answered you, Amit. Secularism as a soft power of India. Is secularism a soft power of India? More than secularism. Secularism जो इंडिया का था वो किसी को समझ ही नहीं आता है ना? The pluralistic tradition has been a soft power of India, and that is the reason we say at times that it is on decline because of the rising, the developments as we see in politics and society. It seems our commitment to pluralism is on decline, and therefore our soft power is on decline. So plurality is a source of bigger soft power. लेकिन हाँ कहने को कह सकते हो secularism भी है ना, an example of India's soft power. Fine, that is it. Then I see you all tomorrow. Thank you.